My name is Rehan Zja. I'm a principal academic at the National Center for Computer Animation at Bournemouth University. And I have a keen interest in digital craft. I think it comes from, well, 2002, I think, Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers was released. And I was really fascinated because they got, at the end of the first Lord of the Rings movie, The Fellowship of the Ring, they had the scene with the dead body of Boromir. And in the second film, they wanted to present Gollum, and they liked the look of that dead body, that dead look of Boromir. And so they got the makeup artist and they asked him how he did it. And basically it was whitening the skin and then tracing the veins on top. That's how you create it, apparently. And they got the makeup artist and they taught him the new software, Mari, that had come about, and got him to actually work as a texture artist on the Two Towers, working on Gollum, texturing Gollum. So that was really interesting because it was basically a real world craft skill that was then translated over to the digital realm. And so what I'm presenting here are a number of projects that students and staff have been doing and working on at the National Center for Computer Animation. Now, NCCA was established back in 1989 by a professor in computer science, Peter Komnenos, and a professor in the arts, Peter Hardy. And since then, we've won the Queen's Anniversary Prize for education and fantastic research and all the rest of it. But the guiding philosophy, the motto for the NCCA has been technology in the service of the arts, or the marriage of art and science. And so there hasn't, we haven't, or we try not to see a tech or art divide as such. And Peter Komnenos actually did this wonderful paper, or the paper, on the fact that this is purely more of a Western construct, this art-science divide. You don't find that as much in the East as you do here in the West. So what I'm proposing here is actually, it's not just the art and science, but now the digital and the real world realms, which are becoming a blur. And you can keep hopping from one to the other, depending on what your comfort zone is, how you feel, whether it's the tangibility of the real world that gives you that better control, or whether it is the ease and Control Z of the digital that you prefer. So, sorry, can I minimize this? No? Yes, I can. Okay, oh, that's fine. So this is a project, final major project called The Hunt. And the students had a very particular look in mind for this. And they wanted to create textures that looked hand painted, and they were struggling. We were, the project was due in June, and we were in, I think, February or March, and they were still struggling with creating that aesthetic that they wanted. And finally, it came to that. We thought, okay, why don't you just paint the textures and then scan them in and map them on the material? So let me see if this works. Oops. Potential security threat. Shall I continue? Okay. So I'll keep talking whilst this plays, just to give you a snippet of that look. No, don't want to join. Under control.
I don't think you're playing here.
Oh,
though,
I'm not.
but,
Yeah. I see. So the screen share is only for.
Yeah, we'll have to stop. Sorry.
Thank you.
Mm.
Cool.
Nice.
So thank you so much. You saved the day. So this is the kind of look that they wanted, and they finally managed to achieve it to a degree, which was really interesting. So all the textures for the cabin and for the environment, they were hand painted on canvas and then mapped on, which created this kind of interesting look. So the story is about basically a dog that has served its master really faithfully, but now is getting old, and it's bit him, and basically it's the end of life for the dog, and it's the master trying to bring himself to actually put the dog down. It's really sad. So I live in denial. I like to, stay away from tragedy, so I'm not going to show it. But the idea is, so in the case of Lord of the Rings, it was the art, the craft skill that they were translating across the room. In this case, it's the actual material that's being transferred from the real world into the digital, which I find really interesting. And this is where it ends, right?
Oh.
So no, it's a PG-12, no, but right. So screen share stopped and screen share again.
That's why it's funny.
Thank you. And optimize for thank you. Right. So with COVID, we have a unit called Research and Development. The problem was, especially during the lockdowns, was the students, they really couldn't leave their homes and they were confined to the bedrooms. And the whole idea behind some of these units is to do practice-led research or practice research and go and create something. And so this student was struggling with ideas and what to do, and again, being locked up in a room. So in the end, she was keen on painting and photography, and what she did was basically this glass painting, which reflected kind of how she felt being in the lockdown. So this was basically her emotions coming out in the painting itself. Being locked up in the room, she actually created a 3D replica, a digital twin of her room. And what she did was actually projected the painting onto the room environment. So this is basically her feelings and thoughts and emotions being projected on her surroundings. But in doing so this is the projection. But then she printed this piece out and she scanned it back in. But as she scanned it in, she actually manipulated and moved the image around to distort it. And so this became a distorted view, much of how she felt living in this time and in this environment. And this was presented at SIGGRAPH last year as a poster. So image-based lighting, just a quick introduction. So basically for visual effects, what we're doing is a lot of the times, if you want to have a computer-generated creature interacting with live people, you want to have the same kind of lighting on the CG object as you have on your live action actors. So what you do is basically, this was the old approach where you would have a chrome ball and you would photograph it, multiple exposures, high dynamic range, create one file that encompassed the full 360-degree around the ball, all the reflections, but also all the exposures from the darkest to the brightest. And then you would use that panoramic image to light your 3D or CG creature. What I'm doing here is, in one of my camera acquisition classes, what we did was we did photogrammetry. So we went around photographing a couple of students all around. We also did this process where we took the image-based lighting, created the image-based lighting for them. And the sphere that you see, so imagine that's, I don't know, a robot or a CG troll sitting in between them. And the idea was to get spatially correct, realistic reflections and lighting on that object. So having a 3D replica of the scene allowed for better spatial interaction. Because what happens if we just use this approach is that the space becomes, the space diminishes basically the volume. So any point that is close to me here would become the same as, I don't know, a point that is at infinity. So to avoid that space compression, what we did was basically have a 3D scan as well as image-based lighting to project the light on top. And then in one of the actual photographs, placed that sphere with the spatially correct lighting and reflections in between. Right, so this is a project that Carl there is currently undertaking for her PhD. I'll be finishing very, very quickly. So, and I'll let her talk more about this. But just as a very quick overview, this was a 3D scan of Exeter Cathedral, and using basically the remnant paint in the stonework. The idea was to repaint and restore the original paint that was on there, which is really interesting. You would have heard about virtual production. So this is the new thing that happened during COVID as well. It's been used in on Mandalorian, where they have, instead of a green screen, now you have an LED wall. So you have interactive lighting, the light for any reflections that you have on the subject. You can get more realistic lighting and reflections. What I was using this for was photography. I thought it could be really interesting.
Okay, so we have
So you
this
don't have to
LED
go
volume,
off
and we're using that
fancy
as
locations. Bring the
source of
locations.
interactive lighting to light up our
In
subject.
this case, I've got
And we should have
the model
subject
against a green screen. So what I'm doing here
And what
is
I'm doing
using this
here
image to light the
is,
subject
I'm going to
and then replace the green
make
screen
the image brighter
with the same image. So it
and
looks part of
fill
it.
the screen.
The problem is the LED panels don't have the full RGB range that you get with lighting, with tungsten lighting. So there's still a problem there. Phase one were kind enough to loan me a 150 megapixel camera, which was fantastic. So it showed any artifacts would show up there.
Okay, so we have this.
This is a similar thing, except now I've got the subject against a CG computer-generated game engine background. So this is live, and you see this marker cluster on top. So as I move the camera, because it's motion tracked, the whole background changes with it. So I can find the right environment. I can also take this marker cluster off and use it as a prop to change the background whilst keeping the camera where it is. I can move things around, I can change. And these are the results. So in here, this is a real world backplate, but you can see with, had it been green screen, you would have gotten green spill, which would have been difficult to get rid of, especially on the yellow top there. But you have the background image that you can see through any translucent bits. And this is against the CG background. The images on the left that you see here are basically lit using the LED wall. So that becomes a very huge light source. And these are the references. Very quickly, I think, I was talking about the younger generation and how with the whole metaverse, the real and the meta. But also, one of the points I was thinking about this was the fact that my 15-year-old started going to the gym with me. And I was thinking it's very difficult to get him out of his zone from technology, away from technology. And yesterday he was flexing his arm and showing me, look, I got some definition there. And now I'm thinking, are we trying to become more like our avatars now? Is it working the other way? Which is interesting. Anyway, I'll stop at that. Thank you very much.